Welcome back to Switched to Linux. Today we're continuing our discussion on desktop environments and we come to Budgie. Budgie is one of my favorite desktop environments just for what it is and how it looks and how it feels. It's just this great desktop that you don't have to do a lot with it, but you don't really want to either. That is a great sentiment. So this actually came out of this whole Gnome business when Gnome went from 2 to 3, and a lot of people did not like that feel of 3, and it's still a controversial view now. You either love it or you hate it. There's not a lot of in between. And so what ended up happening here is that Gnome split off, of course. Mate, as we already talked about in the previous videos, Mate went off to maintain and fork Gnome 2 to keep that entire feel, but what Mate missed is a lot of the modern aspects and elements. A lot of the deep integrations that we might get inside of some other desktop distributions, like things like your online accounts, or integrating your notifications, or integrating on a system level certain types of accounts like you might use for contacts or calendar events or things like that. Some people don't really want those, which is perfectly an acceptable reason to use a desktop like Mate. But then of course we talked about Cinnamon, and the developers behind Linux Mint wanted to keep a completely traditional desktop environment but have some of the modern elements. So that's why they forked Gnome at Gnome 3, to keep those modern elements but maintain a totally traditional desktop environment, which honestly is why I like it, because I've tried all these desktops and I'm still the most efficient on that traditional layout, which is why I prefer to use Cinnamon. But as a close second is Budgie. I think Budgie might be my third favorite, but anyway. Regardless, what Budgie set out to be is to be a modern take on a traditional desktop, but not too traditional. Not too traditional. That was the statement from one of the original developers. This was first released, version 1, February 18, 2014, and it was buggy. That's right, Budgie was buggy. And the first release happened, but people gave it a little bit of promise, give it a little bit of time, and now we're at version, I think about 10.5 or so at the time I'm doing this video, and it has become an amazing, highly stable, highly feature-rich desktop that has a very good traditional feel with a lot of your modern elements and integration that you might be looking for. These factors combined together made it so good that oftentimes you don't want to change it around a lot, which is probably good because there's not a lot of extensions and the customization is really minimal. Not a lot of customization you're going to do on it. But you do have the modern layout, you do have the modern experiences. It is clean, it is stable, but it's not too similar. It's just similar enough to be comfortable, but it has some extra features called the Raven menu, which pulls out and integrates your contacts and your calendars and even your music players and several other features into that menu for one organized system. This really the best thing that Mac did with their OS, having the slide out panel, notification panel with all these different features. So they've integrated this type of thing into a more of a traditional feel. So what ended up happening is the Budgie desktop became eventually so good, it was pulled into so many different major distributions, giving it that extra boost, such that now you can find it in Arch, you can find it in Debian. You can't find it in OpenSUSE that I know of, but it is into Gecko, which is kind of OpenSUSE done right. There is a build for Manjaro, Sparky, and even now an official Ubuntu flavor, and also as of 2018, it is also now in Void. So you do have a lot of options for Budgie. Of course, the flagship for Budgie is Solace, which, like we said earlier, was developed for that. So what do you get? You get the modern Gnome experience, but you get a traditional feel with the integration slide out panel on the side, which is called the Raven panel. So it is a very stable, very clean, but slightly different desktop. These are the excellent pros to it. It is among the lightest of your desktops that are modern. So of course XFCE and Mate and all those other older desktops absolutely can crush it on total performance and RAM consumption because there's not a lot of backgrounds or integrations or things going on. That we would expect. But if you want a modern feel with a lot of the modern integrations, I think Budgie is actually the lightest weight. It might be beat out by Plasma. When I run just Budgie on Solace, it runs about 800 megabytes. In Plasma, I think you can get about 500, 600 without doing a lot of in-depth customization. I do realize if you know what you're doing, you can optimize Gnome to have that good a system performance as well, but we're talking an out-of-the-box experience. Now it does have, like I said, the amazing integration. The integration allows for the Raven menu to have your notifications, your calendars. It will have your audio player controls, all those types of things, even your power functions, your setting panels, and things like that. These are all great things that Budgie has done, but there's some things it has not done quite as well. Almost like the early stages of Cinnamon, and who knows, this might be fixed later, the Gnome integration is so embedded within itself that it really does feel like you are running Gnome with some extra features added on. Almost like you've taken Gnome and you've customized it to the nth degree with extensions. Now you haven't. That was the error that Cinnamon made originally, if you remember. But with Budgie, you end up with a system that is Gnome with a lot of extra stuff on top of it. And this tends to lead to a little clunky things. Like, for example, there's two settings panels. There's your traditional Gnome settings panels, which is going to control your displays and your wireless and your devices and these types of things. But there's a second settings panel specifically for the Budgie exclusive settings, including adding your desktop icons, which fortunately they've added desktop icons back to Gnome, which is excellent. It has your panel settings, it has your Raven menu settings, and the few extensions and widgets and things that are available, which is not a lot, but it's still young in the development of the desktop. So that will probably come down the road. The other major con, it is a very limited in customization. You can change about the themes, you can change the panels and a little bit of the panel layouts, but there's no launchers, for example. If you want a traditional desktop environment launcher, there are no launchers. There's pinning, you can pin things to the panel, no launchers. And a lot of people have made a big deal about that, including myself. I want the launchers. I don't like pinning things to the taskbar. All right, I talked about that in other places, but that's okay. That's a subjective opinion. There's not a lot of customization is what the point is. So all taken together, though, Budgie has accomplished the exact goals they had for it. They wanted a modern take on a traditional desktop that's not too traditional, and they've accomplished that task perfectly. Budgie is an excellent desktop environment that even the cons will fade away once you stop looking at them. Excellent desktop, and I highly recommend having a look at it on whatever your favorite distro would happen to be. So thanks for coming along on this desktop environment series, and stay tuned in for more desktops. You can ask me which desktops you'd like me to do next. I think I've hit kind of the sequence I had in mind, so let me know the other ones you'd like to see in the comments down below, and we will catch you next time.